Hello, cult members. Welcome to the Pop Culture Cult. This is Sean, and this is this week's episode of Remake This Movie. Now, this is a new show that we're doing on the channel, and we did the first one, we did Demolition Man, and this time we're going to do a movie that should have been better than what it actually ended up being, and that is we're going to do Timeline. And Timeline was a movie based off the Michael Crichton book of the same name. And the idea behind the movie was, or in the book, was this company was trying to learn how to 3D fax things from a couch or a person or a TV or whatever from one location in the United States to another. And what they ended up doing was, instead of finding a way to do that, they found a wormhole in time and ended up going to 14th century France during the War of the Roses time period. And so what they ended up doing was they hired this archaeologist and his students and his family and everybody to learn about this specific site in France and try to understand why they were connected to this place in time. And it was a great book. The book is so well done. It talks about quantum mechanics and quantum math, and then also deals with stuff in the Middle Ages. It also deals with father-son strife and all this like really good depths. And then the movie came out, and it was directed by Richard Donner. Now, you would think with Richard Donner directing it, it would be really good. I mean, come on, he did the Lethal Weapon movies, he did the Superman movies, but it just missed the mark. And for some reason, it didn't come across the way I think that they were really hoping it to be. Now, I have a guilty pleasure with this movie because it's talking about science and science fiction, and also dealing with the Middle Ages, because I'm into all that stuff, right? So I look at this movie and I'm thinking, I think this one is one of the ones that Hollywood should go back and remake. We're already doing some other Michael Crichton movies, and so let's do Timeline again. Let's give it a proper shot. And so what we're gonna do in this episode is recast it, put a director in, and talk about the plot itself, and maybe there's some things that they could add to it, or maybe even take away. So here we go. The director, like I said, was Richard Donner. The new director I think we should get is Gareth Edwards. He did Godzilla and Rogue One. Rogue One is probably one of my favorite Star Wars movies right now. He will be able to give the visual look that we need in this movie. And in the original movie that Richard Donner does, it's very much personable the way it's shot. Everybody's very close, and there's a few scenes where like 3 or 4 people are in the shot together, but there's no grandness of it. And there's no real view of like the castle they end up being in. They don't really do any panning shots, and I think a lot with the action stuff that ends up happening later on in the book and in the movie, it'd be really cool to do these big panning shots, and Gareth Edwards is really good at that stuff. For the cast itself, this was kind of a weird hodgepodge of people when it came out. It came out in, I want to say 2003. Like I remember. And this was right when they were trying to make Paul Walker the next A-list guy, right? He had done the Fast and the Furious movies, the first couple, and they were seeing that maybe he could be a lead in other movies. And so they had him be the lead guy as Chris Johnston. He was the younger, the son of Professor Johnston. And so he was the one that was on site. He didn't really care about archaeology at all. He was there for the girl and kind of maybe spend time with his dad. And but Paul Walker, although I like Paul Walker, this wasn't a right role for him. You need somebody a little bit more son of an archaeologist. You want somebody who's actually a little bit more, I don't want to say not, comes across much smarter than what you think he is, right? And Paul Walker, although he's great, is kind of the surfer dude, right? And that was okay. but not for this type of movie. So in this one, I would like to see Logan Lerman. Now, Logan Lerman is a younger guy. He's really starting to show his chops. He was Percy Jackson. He was amazing in Fury. And I just think it would be kind of cool to see that, maybe smarter than he kind of comes across, that character of Chris Johnston come across as a smart guy, but not really caring about being a smart guy. His love interest, Chris Johnston's love interest, was Katie Erickson. That was played by Frances O'Connor, and she was great. And she was actually one of the highlights of the whole movie. The character is very smart and very within herself and doesn't care anything, but she's also very athletic and able to bounce around. She does a bunch of the climbing, and she's very small, so she can kind of get in and out of things once they get to the Middle Ages and stuff like that. I think that person now should be Katie Lutz. Now she plays Laura Lance. She plays she is on Legends of Tomorrow and Arrow. She's awesome. She's a great follow on Instagram and stuff. You have to change her hair because her blondness is. She plays the White Canary, right? So, but I think darker hair. Let her be this fun, not self-centered, but into herself, archaeologist. And that's how it should be done. Andre Merrick was this grad student at the site. He was played by Gerard Butler. He knew archery and he knew sword fighting, and he was Johnston's like right-hand man. And I think that character should be played now by Clive Owen. We've for years talked about how Gerard Butler and Clive Owen are kind of interchangeable, so might as well do it here, right? Professor Johnston was played by Billy O'Connell. Billy O'Connelly. He's been one of those guys who's just been a character actor for his whole life, and he's probably one of the reasons why I don't like this movie as much as I like. He's in the book, he's very smart and concerned about his son and everything else and what's going on with the site, but in the movie he ends up being kind of this whiny bitch and very kind of can't do anything for himself. He needs everybody else's help, and that wasn't really who his character was in the book. I think now, in this version that I'm proposing, we should get Patrick Stewart. Now, Patrick Stewart's probably a little old for this character, but I want someone of that caliber to be able to play this character as a fatherly, overly educated father who all he wants is the best for his kid and all of his students. And sometimes his students take more precedence than his kid, and his work sometimes does that too. Kind of think of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade when Sean Connery got kind of same fatherly kind of thing. One of the big bads in the movie was Robert Donegar, and now he was the head guy for the company who was able to do the technology and build it all up and put everybody in place. And that was played by David Thewlis, who is Ares in Wonder Woman. And so you know who he is. He's a great actor. He's really good in this role. But I think it should be played today by Sterling K. Brown. Now he's on This Is Us. He played in Black Panther. I think it would be cool to have him be this over smart, self-centered, really don't care about anybody else, but just making sure that this thing works because he knows the profitability of it. In the Middle Ages, they run into a lady there by the name of Lady Claire. I think that should be played by Léa Seydoux, the French girl from Ghost Protocol and Spectre, because Lady Claire is French, and so it'd be very cool to see her. Frank Gordon is this character who goes with them back in time. He's a former Marine. He's a really smart kind of down to earth. He's a Marine, right? And he's there to make sure that they stay safe while they're in the Middle Ages and they time travel back in time. And that was played by Neil McDowan. And I think now it should be played by Eric Bana. I like this. I'm gonna try to put Eric Bana in everything. I love him as an actor. Maybe not as a lead, but as the secondary or third level guy. He's probably not quite the Marine type, but he is physical enough to be able to prove that he actually has the physicality to keep everybody safe. There was two knights, lords, if you will, that were from both the English side and the French side that ended up being important to the story because once they get into the Middle Ages and the team gets split, part of the team ends up going with the French lord and part of it goes over the English lord, and the final battle is about over this castle during the War of the Roses, right? So you have to have a French side and the English side. The English side was Lord Oliver, who was played by Michael Sheehan. He's awesome, just ruthless English guy kind of thing. I like to see him played by Scott Eastwood. He's in the new Fast and the Furious, Fate of the Furious movie. He's also in Pacific Rim Uprising coming out. I think it would be really cool to see him. This would be really outside of his. He's not English. It'd be kind of funny to see him as an English knight. I don't know. Well, it's left field kind of choice. And then the French side, it was Lord Arnett. That was played by Lambert Wilson. Very weird kind of French character and stuff, but I like to see him played by Vincent Cassel. He's the French thief in Ocean's 12. He was in Black Swan. Very cool character. That way you can maybe play off a little bit more of the interaction between those who came back in time and having to deal with those people within the period and stuff like that. And then the last main character that I want to talk about in this movie was a gentleman by the name of William Decker. Now, William Decker was from modern times and had gone back too many times in history to this time period, and he ends up changing his persona and being a knight in that time period, and he was Sir William Decker, and that was played by Martin Krosix, and now he's always that Russian bad guy, right? Always. That character is skeeving and always working the program and trying his best to get himself advanced, and is willing to kill whoever he needs to kill to make sure that he keeps advancing in the ranks. That character now should be played by Andy Serkis. Andy Serkis should be in everything and not a mocap character, as Andy Serkis playing William Decker. And it'd be really cool to see him be able, he was great as Claw in Black Panther, and he's had a ton of different roles that hasn't been mocap. And I think that being able to see him out of the suit, I think more people will start to appreciate what he did in the mocap world. And this is one of those characters I think you could really do it. You're talking about a modern person who was able to adjust and adapt to his surroundings of the Middle Ages, and was still able to fight when he needed to fight and be political when he needed to be political. And I think that would be a great role for Andy Serkis. Now, the movie itself shortens up the book. The book's very long. No movie is ever going to be exactly like the book. There's some stuff that happens in the book that I'd like to have more emphasis on. They talk about language, and that in period, there's French is very different and English is very different, and people coming from the current time to the Middle Ages, unless you've studied that language, are not going to know it. And they really didn't touch that very well. They talked about in the movie about Andre Merrick didn't know French very well, and so they brought a French gentleman from modern times with them who didn't really want to go. And I think that would be a much more important part. And there's also some other like little details in the book that they talk about how when they get back to the Middle Ages, there's really no sound. So you don't hear like cars in the background or radios, jets flying overhead. They really didn't touch that kind of thing. And that's like little details like that I think they need to add in to tell the story better. The most important thing I think too is to give these characters a little bit more depth. In the movie, they were all worried about trying to get to the Middle Ages, trying to find Johnston and then the Professor Johnson and then getting him back out. I think they need to do a little bit more character development in this movie, and you do that by spending more time in the modern era before you go back in time. That's my idea for the redoing of Timeline. Remake this movie today. Make this happen, Hollywood. We need to see this done correctly. What do you guys think? This is my thoughts. Please leave us a comment on this movie. And if you have a movie that you think that we need to go back and remake or recast or redo, please let us know. We're going to try to do one of these every 2 weeks. Follow us while you're here. Subscribe to the little button. Hit the little bell so when we do upload stuff, you get notifications. And like this video. You can get a hold of us too on Facebook at the Pop Culture Cult or PopCultureCult1 on Instagram, and we're at Pop_Cult1 on Twitter. We're also on the Stardust app. Download it for free. Follow us first. And until the next time, remake this part 3. Good afternoon now.